Welcome to Poddy, April 26, 2026. A deep dive in. Today, we're diving deep into something that affects thousands of ambitious professionals every year, the true return on investment of an MBA. We've got fresh salary data from some of the top business schools, including Stanford reporting nearly 190,000 starting salaries, and Columbia MBA seeing their pay jump 131% after graduation. But here's the thing. When you're looking at programs that cost upwards of $200,000 plus 2 years of lost income, the math gets really complicated really fast. So let's break down what these numbers actually mean and whether elite business school is worth the investment. Let me start with the headline numbers that caught my attention. Stanford's Graduate School of Business is reporting the highest average starting salary for 2024 MBA graduates at $187,504. That's a huge number, right? But here's what's interesting. When you compare that to other data points, like MIT Sloan reporting an average of $169,370, which was actually up just $1,275 from 2023, you start to see that even among elite schools, there's significant variation. And honestly, a $1,275 increase year over year at MIT, that's barely keeping up with inflation. But where it gets really interesting is when you look at the longer-term data. Columbia MBAs are earning an average salary of $242,747 after 3 years. That's a 131% salary increase compared to what they were making before their MBA. Now that sounds incredible, but let's think about what that actually means. If someone was making, say, $105,000 before their MBA, doubling that gets you to around $210,000, which is roughly in that ballpark. But you've also got to factor in the opportunity cost minus 2 years out of the workforce, plus program costs that can easily hit $250,000 when you include living expenses. Here's my take on these salary numbers. They're impressive, but they're also incredibly selective. These are the students who got into Stanford and Columbia, which accept like 6-7% of applicants. These are already high achievers who probably would have done well in their careers regardless. The real question isn't whether elite MBA graduates do well. Of course they do. The question is whether the MBA itself is what's driving that success, or whether these schools are just really good at selecting people who are going to succeed anyway. That's the correlation versus causation problem that nobody really talks about in these employment reports. Let me give you another angle on this. I was looking at some data about Fortune 500 CEOs, and here's what's fascinating. In 2018, 34 of the top 100 CEOs had engineering degrees, compared with 32 who had MBAs. Engineering degrees! That really challenges the narrative that an MBA is your ticket to the C-suite. Now, the research does say that degrees in business, engineering, economics, and finance remain the most common for aspiring CEOs, and that an MBA can give you an edge. But the fact that engineers are almost as represented as MBAs at the very top suggests that technical skills and problem-solving ability might be just as valuable as business school networking. This brings me to what I think is the most important part of the MBA value proposition that nobody talks about enough: the career services and networking infrastructure. Rice Business reported that more than 67% of their students secured their internship or full-time role through school-facilitated opportunities. That's huge! This isn't just about what you learn in class, it's about access. Elite business schools are essentially recruiting pipelines for consulting firms, investment banks, and Fortune 500 companies. When McKinsey or Goldman Sachs comes to campus, they're not just looking at your grades, they're looking at the fact that you already passed the admissions filter. But here's where I get skeptical about the whole thing. Are you paying $250,000 for an education, or are you paying for access to a network? Because if it's really about the networking and career services, then you have to ask yourself whether there are cheaper ways to get similar access. I mean, you could probably hire a really good career coach, join some professional organizations, and still have $200,000 left. Over the dirty secret of elite MBA programs is that a lot of the value comes from signaling, showing employers that you're the kind of person who can get into Wharton or Kellogg, not necessarily that you learned something there that you couldn't learn elsewhere. Now, I don't want to be completely negative here because there are definitely cases where an MBA makes total sense. If you're trying to pivot industries, like going from engineering to finance or from nonprofit work to consulting, business school can be an incredibly efficient way to make that transition. The structured recruiting process, the internships, the case study practice, all of that can fast-track a career change in a way that would be much harder to do on your own. And for some people, particularly those from non-traditional backgrounds, the credential and network access really can be transformative. But let's be honest about the math. Even with those impressive Columbia salary numbers, 242,747 Oscars after 3 years, you're still looking at a break-even period that could be 5 to 7 years when you factor in all the costs and opportunity costs. And that assumes you actually achieve those average outcomes, which obviously not everyone does. The employment reports from these schools are notoriously optimistic because they're marketing materials as much as they are data. Schools have every incentive to present their outcomes in the best possible light. Here's my bottom line take on MBA ROI in 2024. It's not a universal good investment, but it can be a very good investment for specific people in specific situations. If you're looking to break into consulting or investment banking, if you need to pivot industries, or if you're from a background where the network and credential will open doors that would otherwise be closed, then the numbers can work. But if you're already on a good trajectory in your career and you're just thinking an MBA will accelerate things, you really need to run the numbers carefully. The opportunity cost is enormous, and the debt load can limit your options for years. Do your own research, talk to recent graduates, and be really honest about what you're trying to achieve. The MBA industrial complex has a lot of incentives to sell you on the dream, but you need to make sure the investment makes sense for your specific situation.